Today is December 3rd, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Jerry Farnham in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Norwich, Norwich, New York.
When's your birthday?
11/9/46.
November 9th, 1946. Okay. Who is your father?
Gerald F. Farnham.
Okay. And your mother?
Beatrice Brewer, Brewer,
Okay.
Farnham.
Okay. Did you go through school in Norwich?
Yes, I did.
You graduated what year?
School. Graduated from high school, wrote that down, 1964.
1964. In your schooling, who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, probably I can't think of his name right now, but he was a former Marine, and he taught social studies or history, and I cannot for the life of me think of his name right now.
Why was he your favorite? Why was he your favorite?
Because he was very active in his classes. He didn't let anybody fool around. He made sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to do, and he took the time to look at history and dissect it for people and he encouraged them to look into history and to find out why this happened, what happened, and the reasons that it happened. And I think that's probably why I had a very large interest in history. And matter of fact, coming out here to Oklahoma, it's given my wife and myself an opportunity to visit a number of the battlefields, because we drive out, and then when we leave, seeing the kids and doing everything, we stop by Shiloh, or we stop by Antietam, or we stop by wherever on our way back. And it's something that nobody's going to fly to Shiloh to see the battlefield.
Yes.
You have to be out here for a reason. And so we come out, spend all the time with the grandkids and everything, and when we're ready to go, we make a lot of side trips.
Okay.
And
What type of work did your father do?
my father was an accountant.
I'm sorry?
My father was a tax accountant.
Okay. Did you play sports in high school?
I played some JV football.
Okay. What did you do after high school?
Went to college.
Where'd you go?
I went to State University of New York at Cobleskill, and I studied accounting
Okay.
and business management. And college wasn't for me at that time. I graduated from high school when I was 17, and because my parents had started me earlier in school, so I was always the youngest kid in the class. And when I got to college, it was like Katie barred the door, girls and cars and that sort of thing. So I did not do well in college. Yes. And I completed a year and then dropped out. And in the interim, I worked probably every conceivable job you could think of. I did everything from tending bar to digging ditches, putting in water systems, Christmas tree plantation work. You name it, and I did it. And then finally, I got to the point where I said, I had a girlfriend who is now my wife, and I said, I just can't go on like this, just, these, jobs where I come home dirty and, that sort of thing. So cleaned myself up, enrolled in night school, got a job at the bank as a courier, and it was a good job, and I was doing well in school. And then the draft came along, and I had not had to I was not called to the draft because I was in school originally. And then when I took my night classes, I had enough courses that I could have a deferment. Well, then they upped the deferment. I mean, up the number of hours you had to have as classes. And so I was no longer allowed, I couldn't take as many classes and not, get my deferment. So as soon as they upped that, I got my draft notice actually on my birthday. So I was to report to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And I didn't like that, so I went down and talked to the Marine recruiter, and I was supposed to report to Fort Dix on December 5th, and I was sworn in on December 12th to the Marines.
Of what year?
Of 1966.
December
December 2nd, 66.
1966. Why'd you join the Marines over the Army, Navy, or Air Force?
I had a large Marine influence in my upbringing. It was a gentleman that was the father of a very good friend of mine, and he had served on Guadalcanal and a number of other places. And he was actually a carpenter by trade, but what his love was growing apples and raising apples, and he would go to all of the different universities that had agricultural programs, and he would get cuttings and bring them back and graft them onto his trees. And the last time that I talked to Frank, Frank was his name, he had 35 varieties of apples growing in his orchard, and that was his pride and joy. But listening to him and people, because I spent a lot of time at his house because his son was my best friend, and I heard a lot of the stories from his friends that would come over and talk about the war and everything. And growing up in a small town in upstate New York, the National Guard would come by, or the reserves or whatever, and they'd come through in trucks right past our neighborhood, and they'd all wave, and would wave, and it was just a very patriotic time, I guess. And almost everybody that you knew, their fathers had served in the military, and so I thought, well, I need to do my duty, and so I went ahead and enlisted.
Where'd you go for boot camp?
I went to Parris Island,
Parris Island.
DI.
How'd you travel to Parris Island?
I actually was sworn in, took the oath in Albany, New York, and then I took my first airplane ride from, matter of fact, they brought this old thing out of the airport. Or out of the hangar, it had frost on it because it was in December, and they put it on the runway and put us on it, and it was one of those where you take off and then the wheel comes up and back, and anyway, they flew us down to New Jersey, and then they put us on a real plane from New Jersey down to Parris Island.
Okay.
So we got there by plane, and then we sat there and waited until they got enough because you had people from all up and down the East Coast coming in there, and when they got enough for a bus load, they waited until it was literally pitch dark, and then they'd load you on the bus and take you to Parris Island.
Tell me about the reception of Parris Island.
There's no way to describe that. It's the Marines have a great sweatshirt and T-shirts that have the yellow footprints on it, and it says, "If you don't know what these are, you haven't been there." And so the reception was, I'm not going to say it was warm and welcoming. It was a real eye-opener. So, yeah.
Tell me about the yellow footprints.
Well, when the bus pulls up, everybody's been quiet on the bus because it's pitch black, you can't see out. They take you across, and there's literally, you are on an island, and you go across this bridge and past the swamp to get on the island. And the bus pulls up to a parking spot, and you're sitting there for a little while, and all of a sudden the door opens, and these maniacs jump on the bus and start screaming at you and yelling and bellowing and threatening you and everything. And you're trying to get off, everybody's trying to get out the door at the same time, and they have these yellow footprints, and everybody's to get off the bus and get on a set of the yellow footprints. When everybody's on them, then they take you inside and they begin the processing. So it's easy to laugh at it now, and when when you look back at it, it was like, I can't even believe that we did that. But yeah, that was our reception.
How long did it take to end process?
We were there all night, and they took us someplace to sleep. Like I said, some of this I just don't remember. And they took us someplace to sleep, and then they got us up the next morning, and we were still in civilian clothes, and they marched us down to the chow hall, and we had breakfast. We came back, we waited, and I think the process was you had so many people, and they had so many people in the first group that it made up a platoon to go into training. But there were probably 15 of us left, and they had to wait to bring in the rest, the other, I guess it was 45 people. I think there was 60 in a platoon, to fill out the platoon. Then we went in for the training, and then you went and got your hair cut and, did that whole thing. And, boot camp was, looking back on it now, you can laugh. At the time, it was not a laughing matter.
Tell me about boot camp.
I didn't mind boot camp because I went there with the attitude that I know they can't kill me. And I'd gone to Catholic school with the nuns, so I knew what punishment was. I didn't think they would show up with rulers to wrap your knuckles, and they didn't. But they had a lot of other ways to, punish you. But it was kind of an experience because you got there and you were in with people that you never ever would have associated with out in public, and which I think was a great learning experience. And I met some people that they would literally give you the shirt off their back and help you out any way they could. And then I met other people that they would sneak around behind your back if they could. Yeah. And fortunately, at least my experience was, there were more of the helpers than there were of the, lowlifes.
What type of training did you have?
It was the typical Marine Corps training. You went through marching and drill. You went through the rifle range to qualify. You had to do the obstacle courses and I can't remember what they called it, but it was part of the obstacle course. And you had to learn the history of the Corps. You had to learn your general orders and, that sort of thing. You had to learn how to field strip at that time we had M14s. You had to learn to be able to field strip an M14, field strip a 45, and then and you learn some hand-to-hand combat. You learned to fight with pugil sticks, and I can't think of much else. I mean, that was and they did weed people out. Some people got dropped from the platoon. Because they couldn't either physically keep up, and if you couldn't physically keep up, they put you in what they called a motivation platoon. And I take that back. You've interviewed other Marines, so you probably have heard these terms. They had weak bodies, men that just came in and they weren't physically strong enough to do the requirements. So they would go to a separate place, and all they would do is work out, and get physically prepared and then they would come back. They wouldn't join the original platoon they were with, but they would join one that was at some point in training. So that, you know, that was, and you had also people that the drill instructors did ridicule. They called them fat bodies, and going through the chow line, they'd be right there, and you had to stick your plate out, and you had to sidestep and all this other stuff. But and the drill instructor would be right there by, because they put all the fat bodies at the end of the line, and you know, if they took a serving of something they weren't supposed to, the drill instructor would take it away and that sort of thing. So
Tell me about your drill instructors.
about what?
About your drill instructors.
We had a very mixed batch of them. We had one that was he was a senior drill instructor, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He was actually a good guy. Then we had another drill instructor, I'll never forget his name, Showalter. And again, he was by the book. I mean, he was by the book, and back then the book didn't say don't put your hands on the recruit. And then we had a new guy that had just gotten out of drill instructor training, and he was there, and yeah, he was okay. So the drill instructor, they were hard. There's no two ways about it. They were hard on you. Were they fair? I don't know. I wasn't looking for fair. I was looking for, I'm going to do what I need to do, and I'm going to keep my mouth shut and my eyes open. And like I said, fortunately, because of all the work I'd been doing and everything, I was in good physical condition. And so boot camp for me really wasn't that hard. There were some things that, one of the things the drill instructors did was they asked how many people in the platoon had any college education. And I learned at that point, or shortly thereafter, never raise your hand and let them know that. But I raised my hand. And what they did was, before you could move on and graduate with the platoon, you had to take a test, a written test. And it asked you about some of the Marine Corps history, it asked you general orders, it asked you a lot of different things to do with boot camp and everything. And we had one person, well, we actually had 6 people that were not as well educated, not, you know, they just had a little trouble with that part of the curriculum, if you will. And so what the drill instructors did was everybody that had raised their hand that had college, they paired them up with somebody that was having trouble with the reading and that part. And early on when we got to boot camp and they had us all in there, it was the first day we were in the barracks. The drill instructors came in and a couple of officers came in and this medical guy came in. And they went down to this one bunk, and the guy that I got paired up with, I didn't know it at the time, but he was down there, and they went down because his, I guess they still called it IQ at that time, was I think 64 or 65, and I think he needed 64 to get in or something, and he was borderline. So they went down, asked him some questions. They said, no, he can stay in. So when later on in training, when we had to match up with people, he was the one I got matched up with. But in that same process, they went over to this other guy that they had a piece of paper, and he was big. I mean, he was a big bruiser. And they said, strip off your jacket and strip off your t-shirt. And he had acne so bad on his back that they discharged him. And what happened was that when you went through your original physicals and all that other stuff, they made notes, and they'd made a note that this guy, somebody, you need to check have the doctor come in and verify whether this guy was able to continue, and he wasn't. And I felt bad for that guy because he'd already had his head shaved and everything else, and here he goes out. But again, back to the story of the guy that had the low IQ. When we went in to take the test, my senior drill instructor came over and said, "Now he's going to pass this test, isn't he?" And I said something, "Well, I'm not exactly sure. He's well prepared." And the drill instructor said, "He is going to pass this test, isn't he?" "Yes, sir." He passed. I don't know. Anyway.
Gas chamber.
Oh, gas chamber, jeez. I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, bring those memories back. Gas chamber, you did what you did. You did what you were supposed, if you did what you were supposed to do and you listened to the drill instructor and they said, do this and do, you got through it. Now you came out with the snot running out of your nose and coughing, your eyes watering, and it was a terrible experience. But pay attention to what people are saying and you get through it,
How long did boot camp last?
I think originally it was 12 weeks, and then because Vietnam got so revved up, I think they backed it off to 10 weeks.
Okay.
So I think we were there 10 weeks before.
What's your most vivid memory of boot camp?
The most vivid memory of boot camp? I've got so many. There's one, there was a guy that we were in barracks in the 1st Battalion, and they're the old wooden barracks, 2-story. And when it was time to go to the rifle range, they take everybody and move you out to the rifle range, which were all brand new barracks, and they were all, clean and nice and everything. And we got out there, and we came back from the rifle range one day, and somebody had done something, so the drill instructors had us doing these push-ups where you put your feet over the end of the cot or over the end of your rack, and then you do push-ups. And the drill instructor said, all right, many of them or something, or do 20 push-ups. And so he'd start doing the push-ups, and then he would be dissatisfied with this guy or that guy. All right, you'd start all over again. Well, there were 2 guys that were just across the aisle from me and down a little bit, and they were talking with each other and goofing off. And this was about the 4th time that we got more push-ups. And I looked at the guy and I said, you better knock the shit off or I'm going to kill you. And I said it just like that. And I was pretty up because we're doing push-ups because these other people are screwing around. I never thought anything more about it. And later on, that guy and I became very, very good friends. And just, he was from Massachusetts. I'd never seen him before in my life. And I never really had any interactions with him at all afterwards. But then, and after we went to infantry training and got out of that, it ended up he and I both were in radio school together. Then we went to Vietnam together. Then so we stayed in touch. And then I lost touch with him. 40 years later, my wife tracked him down. He was living down in Florida. We went down to see him and to see him. It was like old home week. And I parked the car, got out, and I was walking across the lawn. He came out and hugged, and we were like we hadn't been apart. And when we got talking, he said, he said, I was so afraid of you in boot camp. I said, why? He said, you said you were going to kill me. And he said, I wouldn't go into the shower by myself because I knew you were going to kill me. And I said, Jack, Jesus, I was mad. And Jack and I are best friends even to this day. We talk once a month on the phone. We go down and see him. And, but that was getting mad at him and ending up being the best friends is one thing that I remember most out of boot camp.
Was boot camp geared toward Vietnam?
Pardon me?
Was boot camp geared toward Vietnam?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
No. Boot camp was giving you the basics. It taught you it taught you how to shoot. It gave you some self-confidence. That was a confidence course, not the obstacle course. They had a thing called confidence course where you had to climb. I don't know if you've seen there's a movie, Full Metal Jacket. And in that movie, this heavyset recruit can't climb up and get over this stuff and everything. Well, you had to climb up these telephone poles. You had to slide down these ropes on your stomach. You had, but it built confidence in you. And, so they had that. And so really, you didn't do any warfare training. You didn't do any jungle training. You didn't do anything like that. It was strictly learn how to march, learn how to take orders, learn how to clean your rifle, learn how to shoot, learn how to, do first aid and, physical training and that sort of thing.
From after boot camp, where'd you go?
Went to a place called Camp Geiger, which is a sub-camp of Camp Lejeune, and that was infantry training, and we were there, I think 4 weeks, I'm not sure. And that's where you did some workout, and you had to do night orienteering and some stuff like that. And again, I'd been in Boy Scouts forever when I was growing up, coming through, and I knew how to do Morse code. I knew how to do all of the things. So again, that whole thing I didn't have any trouble with it. And I'd grown up as, deer hunting, pheasant hunting and everything, so I knew how to shoot and all that. So those physical things, I really didn't really. Boot camp, I didn't have a problem with it.
So Camp Geiger was geared, what type of training did you have at Camp Geiger?
At Geiger, you went out, you did stuff, orienteering in the daytime, and then orienteering at night, and you learned, you had to do the outdoor activity kinds of things. And I think that was one place where they had an outdoor classroom, if you will, and they had kind of a stage set up there, and when you went in, everybody sat on these logs that were raised up above the ground, and they started giving you these lectures on gas attacks and things like that and what to do. And they asked for a volunteer to come up because they were going to demonstrate how to give yourself an injection in the leg. And I'm going, I'm not. this hand isn't going up in the air. So some guy raised his hand and he went up, and they actually gave him it, but it was the thing was full of water, and but the guy pounded his leg and stuck it in and squeezed it and everything. And they said, and you may get into biological and radioactive stuff and blah 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 blah. And while this guy's experiencing that, one of the things they said is, if you get into something like that, whatever you do, don't run. Grab your gas mask, put it on. The first thing you do, get your gas mask on. So then he goes into another section. He's doing something, and all of a sudden, this gas grenade comes flying in, lands in the middle. People jump up and run out all into the bush. Nobody put a mask on. And it was like they got back, and of course you just got, you got a lecture on what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But, so, yeah.
So from Camp Geiger, where'd you go?
Let's see, after Camp Geiger, I had leave, went home. And then I went out, I was home, I think we had 30 days leave. Then I went to San Diego, and I went to radio school in San Diego. And I hated every minute of it. Because what happened with me was, when I went to enlist, they gave me some tests and everything. And when I got through with the test, they said, well, you tested so high that you're going to be automatically aviation guaranteed. That didn't mean anything to me then. What the hell? I don't know what that is. So yeah, okay, good. I did good. Got a good test. And so I lost my train of thought now.
You're in San Diego, and
Yeah,
you said you
oh,
tested
so
so
anyway,
high.
so we went to San Diego, and we were, you know, everybody, well, at boot camp, once you graduate from boot camp, they have a circle, and the drill instructor comes in, he says, you know, Jones, you're gonna be a 0311 rifleman, Smith, you're gonna be a 062, you know, cook. And he said, Farnham, you're gonna be a 2533, a radio operator. Okay, you know, that's sort of fine. So, anyway, I never thought anything about it. We get out to San Diego, and they take us in.
You're at the Marine Base at Camp Pendleton.
No, this was San Diego at the Marine, they had the boot camp there.
Yes.
Because they have one in San Diego, one in
Yes.
Parris Island. But then they also have, that's home to the Seagoing Marines and some other stuff.
Okay.
So anyway, that was where the radio school was. And so we get there, and the first thing they did was they took us into this kind of like blockhouse locker room sort of thing. And they said, okay, we need you to fill out these forms, and these forms are going to be sent to, it's a background check on you, and you have to qualify to be in this because you'll be working with security codes and secret things and stuff. Okay, so everybody filled it out and everything and put them in the thing, and it was like, you know, they aren't going to check that stuff. Are you kidding me? No, they aren't going to check that. And so I really didn't think about it, but then when they put our class together and we actually started the class, we had like 8 or 9 guys that were missing. And, you know, so they started the class, and and he said, shouldn't we wait for the other guys to get here? And he said, the other guys aren't going to get here. And they got dropped because they couldn't pass the security class, or security code or whatever. So the reason I didn't like it was, one, you had to learn Morse code, which I knew that by, I mean, I was like, that part of it, no problem. But then you had to learn how to put on the headphones, listen to code, and type it. And you had to type on this thing called a mill, which looks just like a regular typewriter, only it has all capital letters. So you don't have to worry about changing, you know, letters or anything. I did not want to be a typist, didn't want anything to do with it, and so I wasn't doing very well in that class, and I got sent over once to the, well, I got sent over one time to the gunny sergeant because I hadn't shaved, so I had a dry shave. You don't ever want to do that again. And then I got sent over again because I wasn't, you know, my grades weren't good, and I said, look, I don't want to do this. You know, if he said, well, if you don't shape up, we're going to put a radio on your back and send you to Vietnam. I said, that's fine with me. I can handle radio. I can handle talking on a radio. And he said, you know, or we'll make you a lineman. We'll stick you on a pole someplace. Get back over there. And so I went back over and I passed and got out. And when we finished, I think there were 20 guys in the class, 22 guys, something like that. So you finished, and then you just had a couple days that you really didn't have to do anything because they were looking at where they were going to place you and what they were going to do. No, there was 26 guys in the class. And so anyway, they came in one day, and they got everybody together, and they said, okay, look, the top 3 guys, we have 3 open spots. And the top guy in the class gets his pick of those 3. And the places were Hawaii, Camp Lejeune, and the other one was weird. It was like in Georgia someplace at some kind of a facility there. So one guy, you know, the first guy that, you know, everybody thought he'd take Hawaii. Everybody's going, I'd take Hawaii, I'd go to Hawaii and everything. He picked Camp Lejeune. The second guy picked Hawaii, and the third guy, you know, ended up down there. All of the rest of us ended up going to Vietnam. And I still have the list, because they gave us all orders. Everybody's name was on that list. And actually, my friend down in Florida, I had just found it, and I emailed it down to him. And it had everybody's name on it and everything. And so we went through that.
How long radio school last?
I'm thinking 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. No, it's got to be longer than
Now,
that.
did you train with radios?
Pardon me?
Did you train with the radios?
No. The only radio training we got was the last week of school. They took us over to this parking lot and they showed us all of the different kinds of radios that we might use. And there were everything from these radios that would fit on the back of a truck, or you'd put someplace and you could actually go inside them, and they had a control panel in there and and the antenna. They showed you how much wattage was coming out of the antenna. They'd hold up a neon light bulb next to the antenna to light up the light bulb without even touching it. And then they did some of the other radios, and then they spent maybe 2 hours on the PERC 25. So we finished radio school, and I think we got to leave after that because we were going to Vietnam.
Did you know you were going to Vietnam?
Oh yeah, I knew from the minute. Matter of fact, I'm not going to say I was looking forward to it, but I enlisted because I thought I should. So we had leave, then we came back and we went to Camp Pendleton for what they call staging. And that's where you start training for Vietnam. And this was by now it was right after Thanksgiving. We'd been home for Thanksgiving, and we were at Camp Pendleton. And so we were doing escape and evasion, and learned how to set explosives, learned how to plant mines and dig up mines, and then you did a refresher course on the M60 machine gun and some other weapons that you hadn't used in boot camp or anything, like flamethrowers and bazookas and things like that. They call them bazookas, but they're 3.5-inch rocket launchers. And so you did all of that. And the funny thing was, this was all supposed to be, and you did like patrolling on trails and that sort of thing, and crossing and river, or crossing streams and everything. But one day that we got up, and it was the day that we were going to do escape and evasion, and it was snowing in California. And we're out there, and everybody's got their field jackets on, they got towels over their heads and freezing and everything. And we went to an open pavilion, had a top over it, but everybody's sitting in there, and they came out and they did the whole kill the rabbit thing and all this other stuff. And then finally they decided, you know what, it's too cold to continue. So they cut that out. And so we stayed there. And the most memorable thing about that was, we knew Christmas was coming up. We just left our families from Thanksgiving. And every night when you went into the mess hall and you got your tray, they'd put an envelope on your tray. And you'd sit down at the table and you'd open it up. And it'd be these letters from kids back in the States. And they'd go, "Dear Marine, we hope you're," and we had guys that were sitting there crying at the table from these letters. And I got to tell you, they were kind of tearjerkers. I mean, or not letters, they were cards and stuff that the kids had done and sent to us. And so that was, yeah.
Now tell me about going to Vietnam.
Well, it was we finished our training there at Camp Pendleton. They took us on buses up to El Toro Air Force Base. We got on a commercial airplane, and we flew from El Toro to Hawaii. We stopped in Hawaii to refuel, and they let us off. They said, "Don't leave the boarding area." Everybody left the boarding area. And then they got us back on the plane, and we flew from Hawaii to Okinawa. and we were on Okinawa, I think, probably 5 or 6 days, maybe a week. And we were on Okinawa because we had to go through and change out. We had all of our uniforms that were issued to us. We took them there, and of course you weren't going to be using, you know, winter gear and top coats and everything, so you put all those in a separate sea bag, and you left that sea bag there, and you took what you were going to take with you, and you were waiting for your orders. So during the day you'd be put on work detail, and some people would be sweeping something, and I ended up in the laundry, and you'd finish at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You go over to the club and sit there and then have dinner, and you had Liberty, and so you were there, I guess, like I said, maybe 5, 6 days a week or something, and then finally your orders came through, and came out, and they said, okay, you know, you're on the flight for Vietnam, and so you got on the flight for Vietnam and flew over. So
And you landed where?
we landed in Da Nang.
When did you land in Vietnam?
Pardon me?
When did you land in Vietnam?
Just a minute, I'll tell you. (12/20/67).
December 20th, 1967.
Yep.
When you first got off the airplane, what was your reaction?
It stunk. It really stunk. I mean, and it wasn't hot. It was warmish, but not hot. But it stunk. And we got off the plane. They took us over to some Quonset huts, and they put us up for the night in the Quonset hut, and it was right next to the runway, and jets were taking off all night long, so it wasn't a lot of sleep. And they wanted to move some of the Quonset huts, so one night they got us up, and you know how big a Quonset hut is. It wasn't a Quonset hut, it was a hooch, one of the wood hooches with the metal roof and the screening around it. They got, I don't know how many guys up, and the whole thing was surrounded by guys, and the hooch was up on drums, and we all had to pick that thing up and carry it over and put it on a flatbed. Then we went back to bed. It's crazy stuff like that. But then the next morning, everybody that had come in had to go into this big kind of a compound looking thing, and there was a trailer there, like a house trailer. And these two guys would come out and they'd say, okay, listen up, when I call out your name, I'm going to tell you where you're going and you know what you're, and they'd come out and they'd say, okay, Jones, you're going with the 8th Engineers, get on that truck over there. Smith, you're going with such and such, get on that truck over there. So-and-so, get on that. And they'd go through and they'd say, okay, that's it for today, and there'd be maybe 20 guys left that didn't get orders that day. So you went back that night and, you know, whatever, and came back the next day. So this happened to me, so I went back the next day, and they came out, and they were going through the orders and everything, and I'm going, Jesus, you know, what's going on here? And my buddy, the guy that I told I was going to kill him, he and I are going, what the heck's, because we'd been through radio school, we'd become buddies. And I said, what the hell's going on? So finally the guy's calling out, he goes, okay, I need Farnham and Elliott. There's only 2 of us there. So we walk up to where he's getting, he goes, oh man, you guys are, oh, you stepped in the shit this time. What? And he says, you're going to Fubai. What's Fubai? You know, what's that? He goes, that's way up north. Okay, what do we do? And he said, here, you guys go over, you get on a plane. We were the only ones getting on a plane. He says, go over there, check in at the thing, and they'll tell you when to get on and what's going on. Okay, so we get our sea bags and we go over there and we give them the paperwork. And he says, okay, go out and sit on the bench outside, and you know the load master will come get you when he's ready. Okay. So we sit out there and we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally this guy comes over and he says, you the two guys going to Fubai? Yep. And he said, okay. He said, come on. So we go over and go up the ramp and go in, and they got the little web seats in there, and so we're sitting there. There's one guy sitting over here, and just us two, and then the cargo thing is full of pallets and stuff. So we're sitting there, and I think the guy came over, and I think he was the load master or something. He said, okay.
C-130 or what?
I think it was. I'm not all that. It was probably a C-130. Okay. The ramp came down in the back. Yeah. Anyway. So anyway, Jack and I are sitting there, and this guy comes over, and he's, trying to yell over the motors and everything. And he said, look, he said, we're probably going to be taking ground fire when we come in. So when we do, he said, we're probably not going to stop. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to jump off the back of the plane while it's still moving and run into the center where there's a ditch there, and you jump in the ditch. And we're looking at each other, and I go, we're still pissing stateside water. We got our sea bags. We're in stateside. What the hell? We don't have a helmet or we don't have anything. And this guy's telling us to jump off a plane. We landed and nothing happened. And so anyway, they told us we had to wait over there. And okay, so we went over and waited. And
how far is Fubai from Da Nang?
It's about 8 kilometers, I think. I mean, it's close. So wait a minute. No. That's Fubai to Hue. Fubai to Da Nang is, I don't know. I really don't know how many miles. I made the trip down Highway 1. I don't know how many times, running convoys and stuff.
But I didn't think Fubai was that far from Da Nang.
It's not that far. It's not a long ways. It would take you without any interruptions. You could probably get down there easily in 2 hours. So it wasn't bad. So anyway, we landed there, and and we got off the plane, and we said, where are we supposed to go? And they said, well, go over and wait over there, and somebody will come by and pick you up. Well, it's monsoon, it's raining, it's miserable, it's terrible. And we're standing there in the rain, and this Jeep pulls up. And it wasn't anybody I knew, but it was somebody that my buddy knew him real well, or didn't know him real well, but he was familiar with the guy. And the guy goes, yeah, jump in, I'll take you over where you're going. Okay, we jump in, we go over, and they take us to these like barracks things. We get out, we go inside. We're FNGs, nobody wants to talk to us, nobody cares, and it's cold and miserable, and it's Christmas Eve. So the guy says, well, find something to sleep on and just make, so we didn't sleep at all that night. Get up the next morning, they have an assembly outside. We're all standing out there, and it's miserable. And this Jeep pulls up, and Santa gets out of the Jeep, and he's got mud all. He's got his hat on, and he's all mud splattered all over him, and his beard, which is all cotton, is all pasted to his face because it's raining. And he's got a big sack, and he goes, oh, I got some gifts for you. And he walks up and down the row, and he reaches in, and he hands everybody a cloth bag about that tall and about that wide, and it's got a drawstring on the top of it. And we get this thing, we open it, and there's a letter in there from this Red Cross group back in the States, and they sent a little care package to everybody. And there was, hard candy and pens and envelopes and shaving gear and, different stuff in there that, they would put together a package and send it to us. It was pretty nice. And they also had a cigarette lighter in every one of those. It wasn't a Zippo, but it was a cigarette lighter. To a man, everybody went down at some point in time and got it engraved at one of the I don't know how to politically, at one of the roadside shops, they would engrave something on it. And I think everybody still has their lighter. I still have mine. So that was our introduction to Fubai. And the first month I was there, it was nothing but miserable. I mean, it rained every day, and the only difference was some days it rained harder than others. And where we were on the east side of the location, and we were on the east side of the runway, and the mess was all the way on the other side. So what we had to do is we had to get our rain gear on, get our mess kit or whatever we had, go out, and when you got to the runway you had to stop because there was a light there that was controlled from the control tower, and if there was a plane coming in, you had a red light and you had to stand there in the rain until, you know, and then when it was clear, light went green, you could run across the runway and then down, and I think it was another probably 300 or 400 yards to get to the mess tent. Mm-hmm. And it was a tent, sandbagged, and there were probably 60, 70 people, and there's room in the tent for probably 40. And so you had to get your food and go out and stand by the sandbags and eat your food. Plus there were all these rat traps where they're catching rats around there. And then, you know, the old thing where you had one barrel to scrape your tray in, one barrel to wash it, and one to rinse it. But when you got to the rinse thing, I mean, whatever was floating on top was probably next day's lunch. But yeah, it was not a good experience.
What unit were you assigned to?
I was with MAG 36.
MAG 36?
Yes, Marine Air Group 36.
Okay. Now what is MAG 36?
It's kind of a conglomeration of things. They have a section that does repairs on helicopters. They have a section that a radio section, which I should have been assigned to, that does a lot of radio work. They run the radio relay, because if you got somebody up in Dongha or someplace like that, the weather up there isn't the same as the weather down there, so you got to send in a weather report to tell them, let the bombers know that no, you can't fly, the fog is too bad and all this other stuff. And so they had a regular relay thing, and you had to man that constantly. And a lot of other, you know, you also had a group that did nothing but phone line stuff. So, and then the things I did, because I was a radio telegraph operator, I got to Vietnam, and they go, we don't do any of that stuff here. Here's a Perk 25. And so I had a Perk 25 for everything I did, except convoy duty. Then I just used, and I carried either an M16 or an M14. And I did, you name it, and I did it while I was there during the course of my stay. If we were rotating battalions off of a ship out at sea, because they'd rotate, you know, because you had a floating battalion. It was like the backup. If you had a unit that got in trouble, they would take them by helicopter and drop the reserves in, if you want to call it that. And so I'd get a call from somebody, you know, one of our officers, hey, you have to go over to the 3rd Battalion or something. They're rotating out, so I'd have to be over there and, you know, bring all the helicopters in and talk to the helicopters, what they're bringing in, what they're ready to load out. And when that was done, it was done. And then if we had, you know, some expectation of heavy casualties from the Army, we'd go over and set up a landing place to bring them in initially at our where all of our corpsmen were located, And then what would happen frequently, all of a sudden the Marines would get a call and the corpsman would go up there, and then they would rotate the guys, the Army down to, I think, down to Da Nang, I'm not sure. So if it was anything that you had to talk to somebody up in the sky or bring in helicopters or bring something in, you know, I ended up doing that wherever it was. And some other strange things. We were supposed to, Sergeant and I were supposed to go down to Da Nang and get on a South Korean ship and bring it up to the landing spot just south of Way and bring something off it that was classified. And we weren't supposed to know what it was, and the reason we were supposed to go was because we had clearances, security clearances and everything, so they had to have somebody with a security clearance with it. Well, we got down to Da Nang and the ship had already left. So we flew back up to Phu, and then we got I think it was 2 days later, we got a call to go over to the flight line, and because they were going to send us up by helicopter up to the landing pad, or up to the, I can't remember what they called it, it was a landing ramp or something up there near Way, just a little south of Way. Anyway, so we go over to the landing zone, or we go over to the flight deck, and this guy comes on and he says, okay, go with this guy. You know, he was the one of the door gunners, and it was, okay, we go over and we get in this helicopter, and it was a Huey. And everything I've been flying on before was a CH-46, one of the old, you know, things. And so we got on it, and the pilot turned around and he goes, you guys ever flown on a Huey before? I said, no, we haven't flown. He says, well, hang on. And so he gave us a ride, and it was great. And it was like going from riding in a school bus to riding in a Corvette. And so he flew us up. The short side of that story was he landed us in an old French minefield, and because there wasn't any landing pad up there, and he found this clearing and he landed, and we got out and, you know, ducked down till he took off and got out of there and stopped blowing all the crap around. And, you know, so we got up, and I stood up and I looked and I go, what the hell is that? And there was all this coiled barbed wire over there and everything, and a triangular sign. And I said to the sergeant, I said, I think we're not supposed to be here. I said, I'm pretty sure that's an old French sign, because it had, you know, it had the skull and crossbones, it had the international symbol for minefield. And he goes, well, what do we do? I said, you're in charge. What do you tell me what we do? I said, you walk that way and I'll wait here until you get there. So anyway, we got out of there, but it was just one of those things that, what the hell, put us in the, you know. Anyway, so we got there. The ship got in, but there was a problem with it getting it offloaded, and one of us had to go out and be on the ship to take possession of it, and the other one had to stay there. And so anyway, we finally got that thing done, got it on the thing, and then we stayed there that night, and then the two of us had to ride on the thing. And it was some kind of, I never did, even with the clearance, I never did find out what it was, but we had to take it down to a radio relay place, and it was a big thing, so I'm sure it was one of those containers that had all kinds of stuff in it with antennas and everything, but I have no idea what they ever did with it. So.
Was it crypto?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Now, was Phu your base camp?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
What type of quarters did you have at Phu?
We had, basically there were 2-story hooches. They were wood up to a certain level, and then I guess it was maybe up to like 4 feet, and then it was screening from there up to a metal roof.
They were 2-story?
Yeah, 2-story. No no showers, no running water, no facilities inside or anything. We had, on the back, we had a 55-gallon drum that had been put over, and they had a Navy pull chain on it. So you'd have to stand on a pallet, pull the chain, you know, get wet, soap up. And again, this was December, and people, you know, we all thought we were going to this tropical, hot jungle thing. It was cold and
Not in
miserable.
the monsoons.
In the monsoon it was. Later on, all of that, everything dried up, and it was so dusty that when you walked, it was like stepping on talcum powder. It was, yeah, it was just not nice. So, yeah.
So you just went out and did things you had to do with radio communications?
Yep.
Okay.
And, you know, it was that, and, you know, doing it at night, you know, you'd have to do radio checks to make sure that everybody was, you know, online and, you know, and taking messages and, you know, whatever you had to do.
So you were
And-
communicating with just Marines out in the field, or what?
Usually it was with other locations that, you know, had a information center, or whatever you want to call it. You know, it was like their headquarters center. So, you know, if they had messages that, you know, had to get sent, they'd come down, get relayed down the thing. If they had weather reports, get relayed down, you know, because at that time, you didn't have the kind of communications you got right now. You couldn't get over the mountains and things like that, so you had to, you know, do radio relay. And so that's the way we do it. But then the other thing was, you know, we had a platoon, or no, a company, a rifle company that was assigned to us. And when they were going out to do, you know, either a sweep of some of the villages that had been abandoned because people were always sneaking back in, and or we might have to go out and do a bomb damage assessment. Well, it really wasn't a bomb damage. It was the helicopter pilots, when they were coming back from something, would spot people in villages that were supposed to be abandoned, and they would fire on them, and would have to go out and find out what was going on. So,
Did.
yeah.
What happened?
I was, here's one of those things that, you know, but for the grace of God, from the time I got to Fubai, I had guard duty down in the bunkers on the perimeter for 30 nights. And on January 30th, we got attacked. But before we got attacked that night, it had come down that, you know, all the rumors were flying. Oh, this is going to be like when the Chinese came over the river up in Korea or something. And, oh, they're coming down the road, they're wiping us out. So overnight, during the day, they dug this trench all the way around behind up where this road was, and so people could get in and fight, like trench fighting. And so they were getting ready to post everybody out to, you know, the posts out where we were in the bunkers out on the line. So we're standing there, and the gunny sergeant's going on about, everybody got all your ammo and clean out. And they cleaned out the entire ammo bunker. And I had an M14. And so he said, you got a selector switch on that? And I said, yeah, I do. And he says, all right, come with me. And so we went back to where the ammo bunker was. We got all of the magazines that were in there, and all of the M14 ammo that was in there. And he said, get all that stuff and bring it with you and follow me. Okay, so we went out, we went down this road a little ways, and they had set up a machine gun position that it gets a little, the perimeter was around here. There was a gate in the perimeter, a big double gate that, and a road that came straight up this hill. And then there was another road that was the old perimeter that went around. Well, they'd set up a machine gun right in the middle, looking down towards that gate. And then they dug the ditch, and there was people in the ditch on both sides. And there was a little dugout place on the left-hand side of the machine gun position. And so the gunny put me in there, and he said, start filling up all your magazines. He said, your job is to protect those guys. And so, okay, so we're protecting, and, you know, and all of a sudden, all this, you know, they're illuminating the sky, you know, we're calling in flares and everything. And I kept hearing this, thud, thud, and I'm going, are those blanks or duds or what in the hell's going on? So this sergeant was coming down, checking the lines and everything, and he got to me, and I said, he said, everything okay? You got what you need? You got everything loaded? You got the magazines ready? I said, yeah. And he said, your job is to keep those guys alive over there, keep that gun firing. I said, I understand that. I said, but I got a question. He said, what? I said, are these all duds falling? Are these mortar rounds falling? You know, he goes, no, that's the tube that the parachute comes out, and when it tumbles, it makes a whistling kind of sound, and then hit. So it was where the parachute flare came out and dropped off. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I didn't know what it was. And I'm out there by myself, you know. So anyway, we're all, you know, everybody's watching, nothing happens. About 1:30, I'm looking down towards this gate, and all of a sudden I see, whoosh, just like the movies. I swear to God, it was just like the movies. And it was an RPG, came over and hit the first bunker, blew it up. And that was the bunker I'd been in for 29 nights straight. And then another one came across the other way and blew up the other bunker on the other side. And then they blew the gate on the thing. And so, I mean, what are the chances of that? If that gunny sergeant hadn't said, you got a full automatic on there, I'd have been in that bunker for sure. And it just, and that kind of taught me, if that and a couple of other things, if it was your time, it was your time. There was nothing you could do about it.
Did you have a ground attack there that night?
Yes, they had sappers come in, because what they had done was they had moved all the helicopters off of the flight pads because they were all lined up. So they dispersed them around. And I guess what the enemy thought they were going to do is, you know, come up. They had on explosive packs, and they were going to try and get to those, but they all got wiped. And it was I think there was 15, 20 of it. It wasn't a serious probe. But then the next night, we were over. Highway 1 runs right through Fubai, right through the base. And so I was on the east side of the highway, and there's a French fort over, I don't know, a couple hundred yards away. And we took some fire from them that night, and the guys on the left side did the same. And I never thought anything about it, you know. Everything passed and everything. 40 years later, a guy came in that I'd been doing business with for his company for a while, and he'd come in to see one of the managers that worked for me, and he'd left a message on his card. And when the manager gave me the card the next day, I looked at it and I said, yeah, I know who he was. What did you give me? He said, turn it over. And I turned it over, and it said 6815. So it was 1968, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And I go, oh my God. So I called the guy, and I said, I didn't know you were in the Marines. He said, I didn't know you were. And he said, where were you? And I said, well, I was in Fubai. He said, so was I. And we were talking. It turns out we were probably 100 yards apart from each other. Never knew each other. And here, now we've become very, very good friends, and we do a lot of fundraising for Wounded Warriors together. And yeah, so,
Now, you were still with MAG 36?
yes,
Okay.
yep.
Is that part of a division?
It's,
Or is it
no, it's
independent?
not, it is not part of a division. It's kind of, it's part of, it's the Air Wing, First Air
Okay.
Wing.
First Air Wing.
First
Okay.
Air Wing, yeah.
First Air Wing and the Marines, or
First Marine Air Wing,
First Marine Air
Yeah.
Wing? Okay, that's what. Okay.
MAW,
Yeah, okay.
yep.
So, Tet lasted how long?
For me, just over a week. Because I got up there and I really wasn't assigned to any company, platoon, or battalion. So there was down by the river, there was a large, I think it used to be a soccer field, I'm not sure. And they were collecting the wounded and bringing them down there, and they needed what used to be called LCT, Landing Zone Control Teams. And so I was put over there to bring the choppers in and out. So,
Is that at Fubai?
no, that was at Way.
At Way? Okay.
Yeah, the river at, you know,
So-
where the.
Oh, that you were at Way then?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes. Were you close to the big Battle of Way?
Well, it was going on right over our shoulder, practically, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I was there, and then I went up later on, much later, when they were just kind of mopping up, and ran into some of my buddies. Matter of fact, I got a picture if you want to see it.
Yeah.
That's, I think I got it with me. I don't know if you want to pause that, it may take me a minute to find this. And so when I came home, I had some pictures, you know, that I'd taken in Vietnam, and I was showing them to my mother and father, and she goes, "Oh, well, who are they?" And I was saying, and I said, "And this is Rose." She goes, "Well, he's white." And I go, "Well, yeah." She goes, "Well, all this time I thought he was African American." It was because of Rosie Greer. Rosie Greer back then was, you know, a headliner. So, but, and the other guy, Jack, he's the guy that I told I was going to kill. And then there's me, and then the other guy is BJ.
Which one's Jack?
This one right here.
Oh, the second from the right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And BJ, I can't for the life of me remember his name. But he was from someplace in the deep south.
Mm-hmm.
But, what's your,
Talking about, you know, Tet and Way and all that. You said you were there about a week.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. After that, where'd you go?
I went back down to Fubai, and then I continued to do all of those everything and anything that was needed. You know, if they had a helicopter that, you know, was down and they needed somebody to go out and, you know, we had another helicopter to come in and pick it up, and, you know, you had to have somebody on the ground to communicate with them, and, you know, those kind of things.
When you were, how were you communicating with the Prick 25?
Prick 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I did a number of, what do you call it, convoys from Fubai down to, you know, when they were looking for, you know, extra guns, you get a call, you know, come down and, you know, we need to, and you'd go south one day and north the next day, because the road at that time, Highway 1, wasn't paved all the way, so you could only have one-way traffic. And so we'd go down, and I had a number of friends that were actually stationed in Da Nang. So when I'd go down, instead of sleeping in the transit barracks, I'd go over and, you know, have dinner with them, or, you know, go to their mess hall and then go to their movies and then sleep over there and then get back to get the, but one time we were overnight, and it was one of those times when they changed the MPC, and we were caught in, in this compound. They wouldn't let us out, and we didn't have anything to buy anything with because they wouldn't accept the money, and all these Vietnamese were at the wire, trying to get us to exchange and everything, and that was a nightmare.
Yes, that was, I remember that NPC changing, that was a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have any contact with the local people?
Yeah, a little, not a lot.
Yeah.
Not enough to say that, yeah, we had a lot of contact. We had some people that worked on the base, like the barber that was on the base, but how often do you get your hair buzzed?
Yeah.
And no, not really.
Okay. How long were the convoys you were on? You said you were on convoy.
Yeah.
How long were they?
How long was it?
I mean, where would you go in the convoys?
From Phu Bai to Da Nang,
Okay.
and sometimes Phu Bai to Wei.
What would you take? What would be in the convoys?
A lot of times, well, one time we got on, and this was unusual. We got on, and they called everybody off of certain trucks. And the open 6x, the flatbeds with no roof or no canvas over them. And we went back and they handed us, what were those grenades? They're the grenades that burn real hot, burn through steel.
Thermite?
Thermite grenades, yes. They handed us thermite grenades, and we go, they'd never given us that before. And they said, well, what you're going to be carrying in these trucks are crates of M14s, because they'd changed out all of the M16 or the M14s for the M16s, and they had crate loads of these M14s in the back of the truck. And they said, if something happens, if you get ambushed, if you get stopped or something, pull the pin, set it on top of the thing, because they didn't want the guns falling into enemy hands. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, we didn't have to use those. But that was, we used that, and then on the return trip, it'd be just, all kinds of different supplies and parts and whatever somebody needed moved. Mm-hmm. So.
How long were you in Vietnam?
12 and 20.
I'm sorry?
12 and 20. 12 months and 20 days.
Okay.
Marines had instead of, a 12-month tour, somebody in the Marine Corps figured out that you could use less men if you said this extra 20 days. So it was 12 and 20. And so I was there right up to the end, and when it was time for me to rotate out, I was happy to leave, obviously, and I was pretty sure I was going to get discharged when I got back, because you were supposed to, if you had less than a year to go on your enlistment, you got an automatic discharge. So they flew us back to El Toro Marine Air Corps Base, and that's where they processed us. And I was going through the thing, and I stepped up and gave them my paperwork, and they said, oh, wait a minute here, you got orders to go to Cherry Point, North Carolina, or South Cherry Point, North Carolina. I said, no, I don't. I said, I'm getting out, I get a discharge. No, you got orders. I said, no, I don't have any orders. I said, I get out, I have less than 12 months to go. And so I'm getting I get out. And this guy, I think he was a Lance Corporal, and he says, no, you're going to Cherry. I said, the fuck? Is this going out to anybody else? Okay. I said, no, I'm not going. No. And so they called this. Our voices were raised, and this gunny sergeant came over and he says, what's going on? And he said, let me see that. And he goes, no, He said, "You got a critical MOS. 2533 is a critical MOS, so you have to stay in." And I said, "Oh, gee." So anyway, I ended up going to Cherry Point, and at that point I was a lance corporal. I was assigned to the radio section, and here again is one of those things that just drove me up a wall. Got into the radio section. We were in a room about the size of this, with shelves all around and counters that you could work on radios, and up by the door there was a desk that this gunny sergeant sat at. And so I got there, and first thing they did was put me on KP. And I go, and they said, "It rotates out. Everybody has to go to KP." And I go, God. And I was so mad. I went down to the company office and I said, I want to put in a request to go back to Vietnam, because it was the way the rear worked. I absolutely just hated it. And so I went to KP, and I liked it because nobody fooled with you. And when I first got there, we had to take the radios down, take them out of the boxes, PM them and everything, clean them, pack them, put them back on the shelf. The next month you had to do the same thing. And I said to the gunny, I said, we just did this last month, and they haven't been off the shelf. We cleaned them, PM'd them, packed them, waterproof, everything. And he says, manual says they have to be done. It has to be done. And right then I knew that I wasn't cut out for the Marines. And so I stayed on KP, and I liked it. Nobody fooled with you. You got up, you went down, did your job, came back for a break, and you go back. So I was on KP for maybe 16 days, 17 days, and a guy shows up and he says, are you Farnham? I said, yeah. He said, I'm here to relieve you. I said, why are you relieving me? I've still got another like 12, 13 days to go. And he goes, no, you got orders at the headquarters. I'm going back to Vietnam. What did I do? So I go up to get to the office, and I go in and I say, hey, Farnham, I said, I understand I got orders here. The guy goes, yep, you do. He said, you're going to the 8th MEB. What's an MEB? Well, what is that? And he said, that's the Marine Expeditionary Brigade. He said, you're going to C. So I said, okay, well, what do I do? He said, you pack your bags, and we'll provide you transportation down to Camp Lejeune, and you'll be working out at Camp Lejeune. So I went down to Camp Lejeune, and I was with the 8th Marine Expeditionary Brigade, and we practiced, did some field exercises, setting up these big radios that go in the back of a Jeep, and with the PERC 25s and stuff like that. And then we went aboard the USS Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. Mm-hmm. And we sailed out of Morehead City, North Carolina, and we sailed directly to, we were supposed to go into Rota, Spain, but the fleet was in there, so there's no room for us. So they sent us up to Barcelona. And instead of being docking out in the bay or something, we tied up at the dock and had, they had port side liberty and starboard side liberty. So we had liberty, and we went out and did what Marines do on liberty. And so then we got back, and we got back aboard ship, and we sailed over to Naples, Italy. But this time we anchored out in the bay And to get ashore, you had to take one of the, I think they called them Higgins boats ashore. And we were there about 2 days, and these civilians came aboard, and they had a meeting down in one of the galleys. And it was an opportunity to go on a tour. And it was about I think it was a 5 or 6 day tour, and it was up to Rome, and the plan included your breakfast and your dinner, all of your tours, all of your hotel and all this other stuff and everything. So, you know, a couple of us talked and said, yeah, why don't we do it, you know? So we signed up for it, and they took us on a bus up to Rome, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was really fantastic. We got to see, you know, all of the sights. We got to, we were at one place, we were having dinner one night. There were 3 of us, and there was a table a ways away from us, and there were 6 guys and 6 women at the table. We didn't think anything about it, and, you know, we were getting ready to order, and this guy got up and walked over to us, and he said, you guys gonna eat here? We said, well, yeah, we thought we would. And he said, well, whatever you eat and drink, you can't pay for it. I said, what? What? He said, we were here in World War II, and these are our wives, and we were all together, and we came up the foot, and we're retracing our steps, and we saw you young guys over here. Your money's no good in here. Whatever you want, we're buying it for you. We said, well, geez, thanks. You know, that was really nice. I mean, we really appreciated it. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, we were there, and then we left. Oh, we came back, and we still had a couple of days in Naples, so we went ashore in Naples, and what a sin city that place is. And
you go to Pompeii? Get to Pompeii?
No, I didn't. Of all the places, no, I didn't. Another side story to that one. After we got married and had kids and did everything, I always told my wife, I said, sometime I'm going to take you to Italy because it is absolutely beautiful. So we had a chance, and about 2 years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I surprised her with a guided tour of Italy, and we did everything we didn't go to Pompeii though, and we didn't go to Naples, but we went to Rome, Venice, Milan, all over Rome. Then we went over to Monaco, and we were in Monaco and on the beach, and then we took the high-speed train up to Paris, and we extended on that. We added a few days because we'd been to Paris before, and there were some things we hadn't seen that we wanted, so we stayed in Paris. And so I finally got her. And one time we were up on that same cruise, we were with this tour group, and we were up in the hills having dinner at this place one night, and all of a sudden they brought out this wedding cake, and this guy came out. There was a small band there, and they started playing songs, and this guy came over and sang to my wife and everything. They found out that that day was our anniversary. Somebody in the tour group told them, and they all got together, and it was one of those memorable things. But
now, how long were you on the Francis Marion?
I was what?
How long were you on the Francis Marion?
Probably, I think it was around 2 months, maybe.
Did you go to Vietnam?
No, we didn't go to Vietnam. We were strictly in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
And after we left Naples, we joined up with the British Royal Marines because this was a kind of a NATO. It wasn't all NATO, but we were doing the exercises with the British Royal Marines. So we joined up with them, and we went to, it wasn't Turkey, it was, where all the old civilization things are, the Pantheon and all that stuff.
Oh, Athens. Oh, Rome.
It was Greece. We went to Greece.
Athens,
And,
yeah.
well, we didn't see Athens. We landed on a beach and then went up into the mountains and played war games up in the mountains. And here's the other strange thing. Came down off of finished the exercises and everything, came down. And I was waiting to get a boat back out to the ship because they were ferrying us back after the exercises. And there was a guy there. The Marines have these shore, not shore patrol, but anyway, they're the guys that move the boats in and out, and they've got a little red patch on
Or
them.
the coxswain.
No, they stay on shore party. That's what it is. I think it's shore party. Anyway, this guy was standing there, and he was directing the boats, which ones to come in and go out. And so I knew that my friend from in the picture there, the guy that we called. Now I'm getting tired. I'm having trouble with my
Rosie?
memory. Rosie. I knew that he had gone to Camp Lejeune, and so I saw this guy and I said, "Hey," I said, "do you know a guy by the name of John Bedrose?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I know him." I said, "Really?" I said, "Any idea where he is?" He said, "See those pup tents down there?" He said, "He's in one of those down there." I go, "You're kidding." I said, "No." So I walked down there, and about halfway there, and these flaps open up, and this big buck backs out of there, and I go, "Rosie!" And he goes, "Oh my God, Jerry!" He said, "I can't believe." Well, the last time I saw him, he was on Okinawa, processing out a couple days before me. So we'd seen each other and said goodbye on Okinawa. Here we are on the other side of the world, running into each other. Small world. But anyway, so we did the exercises and everything, and then we ended up going back and got off of the Francis Marion, and I was then at Lejeune for another 2 or 3 weeks to get processed, and then I went back up to Cherry Point, got up there, and there was a captain that was in charge of the radio section, and I went in and saw him, and he said, "Hey," he said, you've had a pretty good run at things." He said, "I'm going to put you in the radio room, or in the communications room," and it was a very small room, and there were only 2 of us that would work in there, and the other guy, I can't remember his name right now, he was a sergeant, and I'd picked up another stripe while I was on aboard ship. I'd become a corporal at the time, and so the 2 of us worked in there, and you had all these old teletype kind of machines that, and you get this long sheet of paper coming out of it, and it was mostly about the weather and about stolen guns and stuff like that. And you had to log it in, and you had to take it either to the captain, or you had to take it up to I think he was a major, and they had to just sign off on it, and you come back and you file it, and then they'd go to sleep, because there was only 4 people that could go in that room. That was myself, the sergeant, the captain, and the whatever it was, major, whatever. And so I was in there for about a week, and I got a notice that I had to go up to see the major, because I had to get my re-enlistment talk, because I had like 2 weeks left to go on my enlistment. So I said, "Yeah, okay." And I was thinking, this isn't that bad. I mean, it's irritating that you have to take everything down and you just do it and do it over again, and that's just stupid. But the rest of it is, it's not a bad life. And I thought, I don't know. So I went in. I had an open mind, and so I sat down and talked to him. The guy pulled out my record, and he said, "Wow," he said, "you got your proficiency and conduct marks are excellent, your this is that, is this, and blah, 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 blah. And he said, you were recommended for flight school, and blah, blah, you know, and he said, why didn't you go to flight school? And I said, well, I went down, my third week in boot camp, they called me and another guy to go down to this aviation review board. And we went in and, you know, passed the review board and everything, but I didn't qualify for aviation because of my glasses, because of my eyesight. And walking back, and another, I mean, I've had so many strange occurrences, but the guy that went down with me was a guy that I went to high school with, and I hadn't seen him in like 3 years. And here we are going for and he didn't pass. And I said, why didn't you pass? Because this guy he was like 6'3" and probably 280. And he said, because I don't have enough teeth. And I said, what? He says, yeah, you have to have so many of your own teeth. And he had dentures, which I'd never known through high school. And so he wasn't qualified, and my eyesight kept me out. So anyway, so I'm talking to this major, and he said, well, you got a very good record. And he said, and with your MOS, he said, the only thing you're qualified to do outside is be a taxi cab dispatcher. And I said, what? He said, yeah, that's the only thing you're qualified to do. I said, to be a taxi cab dispatcher? He said, yes. And I said, okay. I said, no, I don't want to re-up. No. And then on my DD 214 under that page, it says undecided about staying in or something like that. Yeah, right.
So when were you discharged?
When was I discharged? Discharged from active duty on December 1st, 69. And then, because you have to do the inactive, I don't know if they do it in the Army, in the Marines.
Yes.
And my full discharge came through December 1st, 1972.
Yeah, you have a full 6-year obligation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's your best memory of Vietnam?
Probably leaving. Really. It's probably leaving. I saw enough that, if I would have gone back, if somebody said, hey, you really need to go back, I would have gone back. But there was just so much waste going on that, and it looked like a lot of futility. That you'd see this happen, and the same thing would happen again, and I saw things that I didn't want to become. And one of them, an example was one of the first times I was on a convoy and we were coming back, and these guys were we were on a 6x, and they were sitting across from me, and they would take a cigarette lighter and they were holding these coins, and they weren't coins, they were packets of like cheese and stuff that you got in a sea ration can or a sea ration box, and they're heating them up, and then they'd throw them out because the kids would run behind the truck, and I go, Jesus, I said, what the hell's wrong with you? I mean, it was like, and I didn't want to end up being like that, but after a while you do get jaded, and after I came back, I had one very, very, very good friend that I went to radio school with, and we became very good friends other than the guys in there. And I got to know his girlfriend, and we used to go when we were in San Diego. We'd go up to there's a park in San Diego there, and they had these booths where you could go in and sit down and have a conversation. It had like a speakerphone in there, and I'd go up with him and I'd talk to his wife and everything. And then when he wanted to be alone, I'd leave. And so I sort of knew her, and I knew him real well, and he, when I was going to Vietnam, he went to Camp Lejeune, and he would write me a letter. He said, well, I don't know. He said, I'm thinking I'll be there not too long, distant future. And then I got a letter that he and his wife were going to have a baby, and they got married, and he wrote me and said, I'm going to be over there. And so anyway, he got to Vietnam, and he was with the 8th Engineers, just south of Da Nang. And he sent me a letter. He said, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you, but the lines are down. I can't get a hold of you. And he said, if you're ever down and you get down to Da Nang, try and get a hold of me, and, we'll hook up or something. I said, okay. Well, anyway, he was supposed to go home because his wife was going to have a baby, so he extended his tour for the 6 months so he could go home for 30 days while the baby was born. And this was right at Thanksgiving, and he was ready to leave, and they needed a radio operator to go on a sweep of the road, and they missed something, and mine went off, and he got killed instantly. And it just, that still just, he was, he was the nicest guy I'd ever want to meet. I mean, he was one of those guys that you're lucky to know somebody like that. So
Would that be your worst memory of Vietnam?
probably, yeah. That, I mean, other people, I knew other people from high school that had been killed in Vietnam, and I knew other people that had been wounded there and had stayed there, and that I knew. But his death affected me probably more than anybody, and they call it, there's this survivor's remorse or something like that.
Did any USO shows come over there while you were there?
There were a couple, yeah. I didn't see any of the big ones. They had these traveling things, and I've got my pictures taken with a couple of stars and stuff. Well, they weren't big stars, they were TV stars and stuff like that. But I had a chance to go see Bob Hope, but I wasn't going to get on a helicopter to fly to see Bob Hope. I was too short at that time.
Where'd you meet your wife? Where'd you meet your wife?
Actually, I met her at a ice cream stand, drive-in ice cream stand. I was working there, and she came to work there, and it was something during the summer.
It's back in New York?
It was back in New York. I met her. We, and I kind of, worked there and ran the place, and so I knew her, but we didn't date, nothing. And school had started, and she was going to college someplace, and I was in a real bad accident, and I was taken to the hospital, and they, gave me the first or the last rites and all that stuff, and they didn't think I was going to make it. And it was in the accident and everything, small town, was in the newspaper and everything, and her mother knew that she had worked with me, and so she cut out the article and sent it to her. And my wife sent me a card, saying, I'm sorry to hear what happened, hopefully everything turned out okay, and I just was thinking about you, and maybe we could have lunch or something if I get home or whatever. And so when she came home, she came home from school and I got out of the hospital, and we started dating, and we dated for a number of years, and yeah, so that's how I met her.
What's your wife's name?
Her name? Constance.
Constance.
Constance, yeah.
Would you join the Marines again?
Would I? Yes.
I'd like to do a word association. I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction.
Oh, boy.
The first one is boot camp.
Boot camp was, it was funny and scary, but survivable.
Radio school.
I'm sorry?
Radio school.
Radio school, pain in the ass.
Fubai.
Miserable in the monsoon, and nearly unbearable in the summer. Oh, and the leeches were bad too.
Mag 36.
Mag 36 was okay. For the most part, they left me alone. I mean, oh, we got to send you over here. We got to send you over there. We got to send you over there. But it didn't. I had a set of friends. The four that we took pictures of, and there were some more. But it was platoon or company that I would rather have been with. That would be my. I would rather have been with a company or a platoon.
Tet.
Only to our guys, but to the civilians in way, and to to what we did to that country. That's awful. Just.
Why were we in Vietnam?
Why were we in Vietnam? The old domino theory. Somebody kept pushing, I think, the domino theory that, if this country falls, that country falls, the next country falls. We gotta shore this up and make sure that it doesn't. But I don't think people knew how corrupt other countries are. I think the United States has always gone on the assumption that, well, a democracy is, you can have a democracy, but if they've never had a democracy, if it's always been a dictatorship, or it's always been run by a family or a tribe or something, you don't just go in and change that overnight. And we tried to change something that we just, if we had partnered with them, but we went in, and I think from all levels, people look down on the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese are very nice people. And honestly, I don't hold anything against that group of people.
USS Francis Marion.
USS Francis Marion was probably my savior, because I came back and I really didn't. I had survivor's remorse or whatever it was, and I had some other things going on, and you just, when I couldn't talk to my mother and father and my brothers. I had all younger brothers, and on the Francis Marion, every person on that, except the Navy guys, everybody on it was a Marine. Every single person, with the exception of probably 12 people, had been to Vietnam. And we all had something in common, and we could all sit down and talk about it and say, and we'd quiz everybody to make sure everybody was not BSing somebody. And, and it was a way of talking about stuff that you didn't have to be either embarrassed about or you might be talking about losing somebody, and the other person, oh yeah, I know exactly my friend, blah, blah, blah. So you had something in common that you just couldn't talk to your girlfriend, your family, you couldn't find somebody. And back then, when I got out, nobody wanted a ex-serviceman around. I mean, you were like poison. And one thing I will admit, I never, ever, ever got spit on or cussed at or anything in an airport. I read all these stories about it. It never happened to me, but I'm sure it did happen to people.
Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson, fool,
Richard Nixon.
bigger fool.
How do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered? Probably first off as a good father and a good husband and a citizen and somebody that tried to live their life the way it was lived in the old days, with honor and with a profession. And
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
yeah.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Well, I'd say it's been fun, but I wasn't sure what to expect.
And again, this is December 3rd, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview at Jerry Farnham in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.